Welcome to episode 267 of This Is Whole Life. I love saying This Is Whole Life.
I like it. It's got a real ring to it.
It does. And hey, check out that new logo, because not only was the name of the show Ken's idea, Ken reconfigured the logo and it's better than ever. So if you saw it last week, now it's even better because I'm not a graphic designer. I told you last week I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
You know,
But
we're just a good team. That's all there is to it. I mean, you came up with the idea,
But what did I tell everyone last week? The more time you spend with Ken one-on-one, the smarter you become. And you laughed. You said, I want to see that science. And I said, Ken, that's common sense. And I stand vindicated.
I am wordless.
Wordless.
I still stand by that. That's not true.
That's not true. Well, you know what? This past week, we did a couple of really cool things here at WholeLife Church. I wanted to make sure you guys were all aware of them because, you know, maybe you didn't catch the service online and you just count on the podcast as your outlet for everything Whole Life. And so just want to make sure you're not going to miss these. First, and this one's probably not a surprise, we continued our series on This Is Us and on our values as a church community. And we talked about the value of grace. Now, hang on there because there's going to be more on that coming straight ahead. But I wanted to take a moment and have Ken welcome our newest member of the team here on the podcast. Now, I wasn't surprised at all that Ken would see a need and fill a need. Okay? I just wasn't. And he rounded out our podcast team with a high-quality new addition. So, Ken, would you please introduce us to Ray?
I'd be happy to. Sitting off to my right is Ray. He's fantastic. He works hard. And I actually feel like I'm smarter by being around him. So, yeah, I really like Ray. He's a good guy.
Ray is the quietest guy I've ever met. It's almost like he's not in the room. Yes. Sometimes he's that quiet.
You're going to be glad, though, that we have Ray on the show because if anything ever goes wrong, that was Ray.
That was Ray. But I heard that Ray, it's probably what got him hired, he did a great job last week on a bonus episode with a little short story by Ken. So if you are listening to that episode right now because it came up in your feed next, you're going, wait a minute, what? Bonus?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Ray.
That was Ray.
And a great story by Ken, which made me laugh. And my wife actually listened to the bonus episode.
So are you saying she's not a regular listener to the podcast?
No, she's not. And she'll tell you that, first off, she can't listen and then do other things because she'll forget what she's listening to. The other one is my voice puts her to sleep.
Well, I have to tell you, though, Randy, that when Ray made that change, it threw off my mom. And my mom is, I'm going to guess my mom is listening right now. So I'm going to say hi, Mom.
Hi, Mrs. Wetmore.
She said, I can't find this bonus episode I'm hearing about that Ray put out. Right. Because she was watching the church service. This bonus episode that Ray put out, I can't find it anywhere. So, Mom, I sent you the text. I hope you found it. And for those of the rest of you who haven't found it, Ray had a genius idea when he dropped that bonus episode. You should listen to it. It's pretty good.
Good job, Ray. So
excellent job, Ray.
Excellent job. So, Mrs. Wetmore, I mean, I've never met you. I've seen you on a video, a single video.
Right.
And so if you have feedback for Ray, for Randy, for Jeff, for Ken, then 407-965-1607, you can text it. You can leave us a voicemail. I would love to play your voice on the air on the next podcast. If you leave us a voicemail, let us know. Anything we should be doing different, anything Ken should be doing different is really what I'm asking. But, but Ray's doing a great job. So if you have anything to add, or you can, if you're an email person, podcast at wholelife.church. Now, podcast at email, what? Podcast at wholelife.church. That's more confusing. Text might be easier. Or the voicemail. I'd really love to hear your voice.
We're going to blame Ray for that.
That's it. Ray. This is Ray's idea, but I think it's a good one. All right. Now, the next thing that we did, and this is likely less noticeable, was that while Ray and I seemingly have quite a bit in common, I realized yet again that Ken and I have a lot in common as well. We've already confirmed that we don't remember names very well by putting them with faces. It's just not a strong suit for either of us. But also that we hate buying tires for Ford Freestyles.
Did you have a Ford Freestyle?
With extremely rare 17-inch rims for which tires are manufactured by only 3 brand of tire manufacturers in total, teaching valuable lessons on both supply and demand, and that Ford is famous for scrubbing the outside of your tires off quickly, efficiently, and without any recourse. They're very expensive. I present to you Ken Wetmore, my wife's current vehicle.
I wish if you were sitting here in the studio, you would be looking at a beautiful it looks like a Ford Freestyle to me. They actually called it. I think they have it like the X.
This was ours is the Freestyle, and it's there was one bigger one. There was one more that had like navigation.
Like the Ford Freestyle, though, what you need to understand, it's a sports van type of thing. It's actually on a truck chassis,
on a Volvo chassis.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's a really great car if you live in Spokane, Washington, and have to plow through 2 to 3 feet of snow. It's also pretty good at going through water, from what I can tell.
Yeah,
but the problem is one tire gets a little bit bald, and you have to replace all 4 because all-wheel drive, they all have to be basically within a certain mil, or it messes up the computer system or something.
Well, and ours is only a front-wheel drive, so ours is not all-wheel drive.
Well, congratulations!
Right,
you're in Florida.
So I know
you don't really need the all-wheel.
We're at least ahead of the game on that one. And if you own one, or if you're thinking about buying one, I'll give you this little piece of advice. About 3 times a year, Costco does a buy 3 get 1 free tire sale, and that is the only way I can afford to put tires on this car because they go quick.
They do.
And if you buy the Michelins, I'm just saying they last a little bit longer. More expensive, but they're the best tire we've had on them so far.
Good to know.
There you go. So, yes, my wife's and she
said in church. Ken and Randy, I thought this was a spiritual, not the car and.
Well, this is like Shade Tree Mechanic portion of the show where
gotcha.
we want to make sure that if you were going to buy a car like this, you need to know the facts in ahead of time, because you saw what it did to Ken.
Yes,
buying these tires.
It brought me to a spiritual crisis.
And it's done the same for me. And so my wife is looking at the picture, and I'm like, what did you notice? That was kind of funny, right? Like Ken had and she's like, that's not the same car. And I'm like, no, it's the same car. And she's like, no, it wasn't. And Ellie's like, Mom, yeah, definitely, same car. She's like, I don't think so. But she didn't get a good look at the picture.
Good thing she's not listening to this podcast.
She's not. So we don't have to worry about it. All right. So while Ken and I share, a disdain for purchasing expensive tires needlessly, were you able to ascertain why God couldn't do something as simple as just taking care of 4 new tires, or why the myth of works one day a week still exists? Did you figure those out through the process of this message?
I definitely did. Definitely God was working on my character, and just as my tires were getting rounded off, so were the rough edges of my character. So there you go.
Wow.
There you go.
That's a nice.
Did you like that?
That's a better.
I came up with that right here on the spot.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's better than
no extra charge.
That was better than I thought it was going to be. I like it. So now, unlike Ken, I was quite pleased with Tim Keller's assessment of the younger versus older brother, and he called it the parable of the 2 lost sons,
lost sons, and or the prodigal God, the prodigal father.
Yeah. Because this story might be one of the best biblical onion stories we have. It seems like everyone that tackles it peels a different part of the onion, and we find out things we've never considered, maybe, or different angles.
Yeah.
Tim's view of the older brother working for his father's love. Now, that's a sobering idea for many who've only seen and understood the treasonous younger son, as that would be me, because I'm the youngest, and we all know that,
we do.
The youngest are.
You knew you were. But that's the thing. That's what really just hit me about that parable, is that it really is you think it's a parable about the younger brother. It's really a parable about the older brother.
I've never heard that it was a parable about the younger brother or the father, which in the last probably 5 years, and I don't know, maybe it was because of Tim's book, that maybe all this people started going, well, wait a minute, maybe there's more here.
Yeah.
Because growing up, it was always like, you don't want to be like the younger one. Yeah. And it was never a story. Like the older one was only just a bit player. Like he got his part where it's like, geez, Dad, you didn't do anything nice for me. And you're like, oh, yeah, but you're there. You got fed. And,
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I've actually heard sermons where the older brother is kind of almost eulogized. Oh, good for him. He stayed home. He did what he was supposed to.
We don't even give him a piece.
And, he shouldn't have been upset about his younger brother coming home, but it's understandable, of course. So, and of course, I actually like those sermons because I am an older brother. And so it made a lot of sense to me. I remember actually I was doing a whole series of sermons when I was the pastor of the Upper Columbia Academy Church. Shout out to Upper Columbia Academy if anybody's listening. But anyway, when I was pastoring that church, I did a series of sermons on the parables of Jesus, and I got to this one, and I literally felt nauseous when I preached that sermon because I was so upset. Because at the end of the Jesus parable, if you read it carefully, the older brother really is the villain at the end.
Yeah.
And that was a period of time where my family was going through some kind of rough times. My younger brother was kind of playing that younger brother part pretty well, and I was playing the older brother part really well. I was very sanctimonious and look at me working for God. Here I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I remember kind of getting preaching that, and I try not to be fake when I preach, but I think I probably was pretty fake on that particular sermon because I just did not feel it. And it was only shortly after that I went and listened to a very good. I went and heard a good sermon on on that topic from Tim Keller, and it was actually life changing for me. It really, really changed my walk with God.
That's amazing. What are you? Is it just you and your brother, or do you have any other?
It's just the two of us. Yeah, I mean, and so that's why the story just hits really, really close to home for us. And we have a great dad. So my dad, I think, would be an excellent stand-in for the father in that story. So that story really does hit pretty close to home.
Well, I mean, I'm the youngest of two, and I wouldn't say my brother was playing the other part because I don't think even though I was playing my part really well, I don't think he thought of me as that person, or I didn't feel like he ever really looked down on me. At that time, it just seemed like the story, like it fit really well. And again, not putting any shade on him because I didn't feel that way. But growing up, it was such a different story. It just makes me wonder, like, how many other stories have we not looked at close enough? Whether we're looking at this from a grace perspective, whether we're looking at this from a love perspective. I mean, there's 10 different ways you could attack any Bible story teaching lessons, but I'm like, what else have we missed? Because this one just seems to these are always seemingly like really to the heart of the matter. What is it about this story that just changed your life? Was it just that other realization about being the older brother, or was it more?
I think, what a great point you're making, though, and I kind of want to use this opportunity, since you're kind of throwing me a softball, to tease that this next week we're talking about the Bible and why it's one of the values at Whole Life. And kind of going to what you were saying is that there's so much of the Bible that you think you understand, and you do. You understand it, but it's kind of like it's kind of like understanding math when you're in first grade. You do understand math. You just don't you just start learning that there's so much more to it as you go on into upper grades and on to advanced math and calculus and so on and so forth like that. You kind of realize that nothing changed with math. It's just as you grow and mature, you're able to understand more. And I think that sometimes we make a mistake in that when we read through the Bible, we I've already read that, so I already understand it. And it's interesting how God, depending on where we're at in life, will read parts of the Bible and I think, oh, I never saw that before. Yeah. I think I read a Bible verse this last week. It was from 1 Peter chapter 5, I do believe, and it talks about this is God's grace for you. And it's talking about persecution. One of the different ways that I do worship is I'll go through and paraphrase a book of the Bible into my own words. So I'll take the book and I'll just write it out in my own words. And I'll study the passage as I go. And I was doing that with 1 Peter. And I came and I thought, wait a minute. This is your grace? Persecution, hard times, this is God's grace for you. And I thought, well, what am I missing here about grace? I kind of always thought it was kind of warm, fuzzy, and happy. It's like God's goodness, the good things, the winning the lottery, stuff like that. And here Peter is saying, no, this God's grace for you is persecution. And so sometimes, and I brought this out in the sermon, that sometimes grace isn't pleasant. Sometimes when God does good things for us, it isn't always comfortable. And so to go to your point, yes, I think that as you grow in your different places in life, you will peel back the layers of the onion that's there. Yeah. And particularly when it comes to Jesus' parables, they are really deep. And the beautiful thing about a story or a parable is, unlike sometimes just straight teaching, when you say do this, don't do that, more of a 10 Commandments style of teaching, honor your mother and father, don't steal. There's depth there too. But when you take a story and tell somebody a story, you can hear that story 15 different times and get 15 different lessons out of it. And the same thing's true. That's why Jesus told the parables, is because at different points in your spiritual walk, you will get more and more and more out of it as you go. But even at the very beginning, you get important things out, and you can't discount that either. And so when Tim retold the story of the prodigal father, who's wastefully extravagant with both sons, I think that one of the fascinating points that Tim brings out is that the way that the older son talks to his father at the end of that story, it's disrespectful, and so disrespectful that within Jewish culture or within the law in the book of Deuteronomy or Leviticus, the older son actually had committed a capital offense.
Whoa.
He could have been put to death for the way he talked to his father. Now, was that the usual custom in those times? No, it wasn't. But according to the letter of the law, which was what the older brother was playing by,
sure,
he could have been put to death for the way that he spoke to his father. Because in our English, we translate it into very nice, hey, Dad, why did you do that? But he actually is, in his culture and his time and his place and the language he uses, he essentially spits on his dad, slaps him in the face, and calls him a moron.
So he knows what he's doing when he's using this language.
The older son absolutely knows what he's doing. He like most of us, when you kind of get to a place of frustration, you lose it, and you find yourself, the real heart of yourself coming out. You kind of find out what's really on the inside that you've been kind of bearing. And so this older son needed grace. He needed his father's grace and mercy just the same way that the younger son needed it, but he didn't recognize it because he thought that because he was out in the field supervising or doing whatever it was that he was doing as an oldest son, that somehow that made the father owe him something. So he was basically, instead of wanting to be a son who inherits simply because he's a son, he wanted to be a supervisor who gets things because they work for 40 hours a week. He was taking on that role instead of the role of the son.
Now, see, when you say it like that, it doesn't make any sense, Ken, but yet to the rest of us, we still do it, right? It's
we do.
We all want a deal. We all go shopping if we have a coupon, right? We'll all go like, hey, 20% off, I'm in for that. But great, no. I'd like to work for that, please.
Yeah.
I don't, that is still.
And we do that with God all the time. Even people who don't consider themselves legalistic, it's interesting to me how often we really go into that mentality of God. It's one of the reasons why I don't like the prosperity gospel message that's out there, that God wants you to be a millionaire and have a nice house and everything be perfect in your life. It's just simply a works-oriented, legalistic viewpoint of God. If you punch the right buttons, then God is a vending machine that spits out the right candy that you asked for and that you put the coins in for. And that's just not simply how God works. God is interested, and I said something, I don't know if it was provocative to anybody in there, but God's not interested in your earthly comfort. And I say that, and I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because God does care about us, and He does care about, but like any good parent, He's a lot more concerned about our character. He's a lot more concerned about our eternal welfare than our earthly welfare. And so I think that sometimes that the difficulties in our life are the things that are the refining sandpaper. I can't imagine that sandpaper feels great to the wood as the wood's being smoothed out by the sandpaper, as if wood could feel. But in the same way, I think that sometimes the things that sand out our lives, they're rather unpleasant, they're uncomfortable, we don't enjoy them, and yet they are what make us the better person that we need to be. I think back on the times in my life where I've suffered significantly, and I look at those things and I see them as God's grace for me. If He hadn't done those things, I don't think I would be where I'm at today. No, I know I have a long ways to go, so that's not me saying I've arrived. But I do think I'd be a much worse person had it not been for God's grace in those difficulties that have made me a better person.
Now, see, this week I felt like I needed to be a little bit nicer to Ken. I've been kind of taking him to task right away, because he's been like dropping the hammer on us each week really quickly. And he waited a little bit this time.
A little bit.
He told some stories first, and we went through the rest of it. And before we got to what he just mentioned, I was like, well, when do I drop the, isn't that a bit harsh moment for the week? And so, directly from his sermon notes, and I quote, grace isn't always pleasant. And I'm thinking to myself, well, here we go. So, which was immediately followed by the super uplifting verses found in 1 Peter 5:10 through 12.
Yep.
This is from the NLT. It says, in His kindness, God called you to share in His eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. And I love this part. I bolded it because it's important. So after you have suffered a little while, hint, hint, He will restore, support, and strengthen you, and He will place you on a firm foundation. That sounds good. My purpose in writing is to, next bolded sentence, is to encourage you and assure you that what you are experiencing is truly part of God's grace for you. Stand firm in this grace. Well then, stand firm in this grace that allows you or chooses you to suffer because it is without a doubt part of God's grace for you. Yeah. That's Randy's paraphrase. That's good. That's not for Ken. It didn't come from the Bible. Why would this be enticing or desired by anyone? I mean, once again, the thing we can't earn or deserve that used to seem so wonderful seems to be lacking a little luster there. So I mean, do I break out the polish or do I just have to look back? But I don't look back. Okay, let's just be honest. I don't look back on a lot of those things like you just described. I do now. Okay, let me rephrase this one more time. I do now more than I ever have.
Right.
But for a long time, I did not look back at those things and go, well, thanks a lot, Jesus and God. That was great. I'm such a better off person. I'm a more well-rounded person. I've learned from those mistakes. And a lot of those mistakes I haven't made again, or I haven't made them to the same degree. But that's a tough sell for a lot of people. And I get it. And that's hard.
At one point in my life, I was a reporter and I covered the military, and I love all things special forces. I'm just always fascinated by it. I know I could never have done the stuff that they have to do to get where they're at, but I look at what I've read. I can't remember. I've read so many books from Navy SEALs about going through what they have to do just to become, just to have the right to put a little pin on their chest. And that's no little pin. That's a big deal, right?
Right.
And they go through what's called Hell Week, and that's only a small amount of what they have to do. Yeah. And yet each one of these people is incredibly proud of what they did. And anybody who did not go through that would not be a part of that community, because it's part of that process of growing and maturing to be, if you can't handle this, what are you going to do in the real world? And I think that, so many people understand that from a military perspective. Yeah, you're going to have to train hard. My point is that all these things, after you've accomplished something, you look back and you go, wow, okay, yes, worth it now in the rearview mirror. Don't want to do it again. I don't know any Navy SEAL, and I've known a few, that will tell you, yeah, I'd like to go back and do that again.
Yeah, no.
They won't. They don't want to. But they're glad that they went through it. And I think when we think about our Christian life, is there anything in this world that you obtain without having to suffer a little bit that's worth having? Nah. Whether it's a relationship, children, I would totally, Kyle and Eric, I would again do it all over again anytime. But man, there's some painful moments along the way.
Yeah, there is.
But it's worth it. And the same thing with relationships. A lot of people will get to a point in their marriage where they think, I just can't make it any further. It's too hard. And they want to go back to the early stages. But what they realize is when they do that, when they go back and start over, they get to that same place.
It's still there.
And it doesn't matter, because it's not the other person that's really the issue. It's your heart that's the issue. And I know for me, that's one of the things there's these little epiphanies in life where you have, and you think, wow, I'm so angry at this person. I'm so angry at that person. Wait a minute. So that's not them. It's actually me. And so it's God's grace that He works to sand those things out. And in the end, we're happier people. We're better adjusted people. But it does take a little bit of effort to get through, but it's worth it.
Well, I like it because I think what we've been talking about, love, and we've been talking about forgiveness and acceptance. And I think if let's just take Whole Life as a church community. If we were all on board and said, you know what, I am going to be just a little bit better with God's help. I'm going to be more intentional on being this better person, better version of me. I'm going to look back and I'm going to see what I've gone through, maybe and realize what I might have yet to work on and what God has to work on, obviously not us. But if you prepare all those things and then you come to this part and you go, we really need to be using those as the uplifters so that when we're all here, we know we don't want to do it. We know there's going to be resistance. We know we're going to screw it up somehow to some degree. And we're going to need someone there that's going to be walking there beside us in person that we can lean on, that we can ask for help, that truly cares, they truly accept us, they truly love us. And when we throw them aside because they're the problem, then the forgiveness. And I've been thinking about this since the message, that maybe those are so important that we already discussed those. And then when you get to this point, you may need to stop just for a minute and go, let's dust ourselves off here a little bit. Let's go and extend some grace to where we need to do it. Hopefully those that maybe need to extend some to us, maybe we're all in a little bit better place. And then how impactful are we as a church community if we're even just a little bit better at it? I'm not saying we're good at it. I'm not saying we're perfect at it. But even if we're just a little bit better at it, what does that, when we talk about our mission and vision and being a church without walls, impacting the people of our community. I mean, we're not just talking about it because it's what church does. It's because we really do want to make a difference. And these are all really critical components. And we know that, but that was just a realization for me that these first couple of weeks, when we put this all together, it seems to me like it's a place to just kind of reflect a little bit and go, yeah, if we can get this part, then we can tackle anything, right? Then next week we can use the Bible to our even stronger advantage to just allow the Holy Spirit to work through us. And so it just, for whatever reason, that was my takeaway from
it's
we
about
went through this week.
Yeah, it's about knowing those values. They're a flashlight in the dark. They show you they show you the obstacles. They show you what to watch out for. They remind you of how you want to be, not necessarily how you always are.
Yeah,
I want to be loving. I want to be forgiving. I want to have mercy. I want to have grace. These are things that are my values, and therefore, as I do things and realize that maybe that isn't filled with grace, I think, well, I'm going to forgive myself, and then I'm going to get back up and let God keep working on me and changing me. There's two things, though. If you really want to grow a little bit, all you have to do is ask God. It's not the easiest thing on earth is to work on yourself. Is to say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try harder. I'm going to go ahead and be a better husband. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be better at whatever it is. That's the easy part. The hard thing is actually to say to God, "You make me a better husband. You make me a better father." Because when you do that, real change actually starts to happen, and it hurts. And just like anything else, when I'm training myself, I never push myself nearly as hard as there's 2 times in my life where I've actually been in decent shape and where I was doing really well with my exercise. One was when I had a trainer that I paid for, and the other time was when I had a group of guys that I was training for a triathlon with, and they all pushed me harder than I would have pushed myself by myself. Yeah. And that's why people say, "Oh, I don't need church to be a Christian." Well, I guess not, but you sure do a lot better in community than you do without it. It's what helps you grow. And so that's my kind of encouragement to people. If you really want to grow, we kind of have this idea of I need to push harder, I need to try harder. Just ask God to grow you, and you'll find that you'll feel like you're slipping backwards because like stuff will go wrong. The tires on your car will go bald, and you'll be like, "Okay, God, I wasn't talking about that. I just want to have more patience." And He's like, "Ha ha! Well, here you go. You go. Start working on that." And it
not patience that way.
Not that way. No. I have a different idea. But again, if you really want God to make a change in your life, just ask Him to. And there's times where I've told God, "Look, I'm hurting right now. I need a little bit of a break." And God's merciful that way too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. The most powerful thing that happened on Sabbath to me was watching the video of your brother who, didn't have, it starts out and it's like, wow, he's not flattering at all. He's not holding back. And when people tell us those things and we know they're correct because we can immediately go, "Oh yeah, that one, oh yeah, they're right." You want to put up your back and just fight back and be like, "Yeah, but you did," or, blah, 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 blah. This is why. But I just thought that part and the story of your dad, that was a tearjerker for your dad to think for a moment that maybe I wasn't the best at showing you what Christ was like. And I think as dads, and probably I'm sure as moms, we can all resonate with that when your kid does something and you go, "I know I haven't done the best job, and it wasn't perfect by any means. Do I owe you an apology?" Yeah. And I just thought that was 4 tires for a renewed relationship with your older brother.
Yeah.
When you put it that way, standing firm in the grace that comes with the difficulty doesn't seem like such a penalty to pay. Because if God said to you, "I know that you and your brother aren't really getting along, but, I'll tell you what, you buy 4 new tires and do it with grace, then, I'll patch that all up for you." Yeah. And that's oversimplifying it. But,
of course.
But at the same time, you do it in a heartbeat, right? Because you love them and you'd rather see the bygones be bygones. Right. You'd rather be back together as siblings, as blood. Yeah. If you can just condense it down to like 2 sentences, what would you tell someone going through that experience, knowing now what you know? How do you make it to the other side and then look back, and how do you make that work?
It's okay to be honest with God about your anger. That's the first sentence. It's okay to be angry and let God know how you feel and be honest about it. And then number 2, once you've done that, decide to trust him.
Ooh.
If you doubt me, read the book of Job. Job gets really upset with God, and he tells God off. He does. You can try to wrap it any way you want, but Job tells God off.
Yeah, he does.
I've done nothing to deserve this. How dare you? I wish I'd never been born, which again is questioning God's sovereignty because God chose for him to be born. I wish I'd never been born, says Job. So it's okay to tell God how you feel and to be honest about it and to be very candid. It's not like God doesn't read your thoughts. So, put it out there and say it. But then like Job, say, nevertheless will I trust you. Though you slay me, I'll trust you. And that's a hard thing to say. But, we all love the warm, fuzzy verse, all things work together to good for the good of those that love the Lord. And we leave out the last little sentence, and are called according to his purpose. Yeah. And that's kind of key. And are called according to his purpose. So what my encouragement to you is if you're suffering right now, if you're dealing with debilitating disease, if you're dealing with a relationship that's just crumbling around you, if you're dealing with financial disaster, if you're dealing with any of those things and a multitude of other things that can go wrong in life, I do not blame you for being angry and for being hurt and for crying and just the angst that you feel.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody shame you for feeling that way. It hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts. It's crazy that we would give a person who is suffering a hard time for suffering. If somebody's just, worked out to the point where they can barely stand up, we'd understand that. You're like, yeah, that hurts. We're sorry. Good for you, though, for pushing through.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody shame you for hurting and being in pain. And you tell God how you feel, and that's okay. And then my encouragement is, and then trust him.
Yeah.
Trust him and say, I don't get it. It makes no sense, but I'm going to claim the promise that it's going to work out. I'm going to claim the promise that there's beauty from ashes. I'm going to claim the promise that you know my name and that you care about me. And then find some godly people to come around you and wrap you up in their love and to hug you and to tell you that they're there walking beside you through it. And you know what? If somebody honors you with that, if somebody comes and tells you the difficult time they're going through and how angry they are at God, honor them by saying that I can understand, rather than this, don't be angry at God. You got to just trust him. Just say, yeah, of course. That sounds awful.
Yeah.
That sounds awful. I'm glad that I get to walk beside you through this, and we're going to pray, and we're going to pray that God works this out. And I trust that he will, but I can understand why you're really angry and why you don't see how it's going to work out. We need to be a lot more empathetic as Christians than we are. We kind of throw out these platitudes and everything will be all right. Trust God, trust that. And those are all true, but they're not what people really need to hear when they're hurting.
Yeah. If you're one of those people that needs someone to walk by you, at WholeLife Church, we have a great ministry called Stephen's Ministers. And that's exactly what they do. Those are the people that listen.
And I would just say, I know that right now they're just this ministry is just beginning, and they're actually looking for people who are in these kind of situations that they can walk alongside. And they're trained to do it. They're fantastic. I just actually had the leader come up to me this last Saturday at church, and she said, hey, if you know of anybody who's going through a really difficult time, needs somebody to walk alongside them, we're gearing up. We're looking for those kind of people. So you can just contact the show and get in touch with the church and let us know if that's something that would be beneficial to you. And we will find one of our Stephen ministers to come walk alongside you.
Absolutely. Amazing ministry. All right. I don't know how we run out of time so fast. We're still new at this together, but we're going to take our questions from the Q&A because we promise we'll get to them every week, and we only have 2 this week that we didn't get to. Sunny Moretta asked, talk about how grace changes lives, not truth. I always heard it was the other way around.
Yeah. And I
did too, by the way.
Yeah, you've heard that as well.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How does truth change lives?
Well, if you have the truth will set you free. That's what I was told.
And that fantastic verse, isn't it?
Right.
And who is the truth?
Well, the truth, the way, and the light is God himself, isn't it?
Yeah. So Jesus is the truth, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes what we have made the truth is more of a manual. And so if Jesus is the truth, what we found in our verse this week is that he gives grace upon grace to us.
Yeah.
And so the truth is important. and knowing truth is important. But what changes lives is the relationship with the truth, Jesus, the grace giver. And so when we show grace to people, that's what really gets them. I mean, you just think about the person most recently who tried to sell you something that you didn't want or you didn't think you wanted. It's really rare that somebody will go where I'll be bombarded with quote unquote truth and be like, "Oh, now I see it. Okay, now I changed my mind." And I think perhaps there was a era a long time ago where people were a lot more impressed by facts. Maybe that would be the better way of that. Facts don't change lives, but grace does. And so, I mean, we see this in our world today, don't we? I mean, everybody's fighting with each other over the people who are anti-vax, the people who are pro-vax. We see them yelling at each other all the time on Twitter and Facebook and any other social media platform and the media. And they're bombarding each other with quote unquote truth. Each side has the truth, but neither side has grace for the other.
Yeah.
And I wonder what would happen if we were just a little bit more graceful about saying, okay, that's you don't believe that vaccines are effective. Okay. All right. If that's how you feel about it, that's fine. For myself, the vaccine's important, or vice versa, whatever it is.
Which way it goes, yeah.
But grace is what in my life, when I see the times that I have changed, when I think about the times in my family's life, the people that are close to me, it's always been because of grace that's been shown to us. And grace coupled with truth is unstoppable.
Truth is empty. If there's no love that goes with it, then the truth is the truth. Fine. I'm just speaking from experience, and for many years, I knew what the truth was. Just because I wasn't part of the church didn't mean I didn't know what the truth was. Mm-hmm. It just meant that what's the difference? If people that believe in the truth and that have the truth are that unhappy, and they are that mean to other people, and you can disrespect somebody in the house of God like your salvation is sound, then I don't want that salvation. I don't even want it. I don't want any part of it. I'd rather just be here when my time expires, put me in the dirt, and at the end, I guess I'll pay the piper. That's totally how I felt about it. To me, there's nothing powerful enough in the truth to change my mind, to make me want something that you want me to have, because you know how good it is. If you're there, you're like, man, I've seen what God's done in my life. You should have this. Yeah. But the truth isn't enough. If it's not the relationship, it's not the grace, it's not the love. What
does the Bible say about it? How are we saved? By faith and grace. By faith in Jesus and his grace, right?
Yeah.
We're saved by grace and faith in Christ. And so that's what changes lives, and it makes a huge difference. And there's nobody who had more truth in Jesus' time than the Pharisees and Sadducees and the religious leaders. They knew their Bibles backwards and forwards. Absolutely. They had the whole Old Testament memorized. Think about that. It memorized, not that they could remember.
From
this verse.
Scroll,
they knew, and yet Jesus was still crucified. And and we're going to talk about that again more this Sabbath when we talk about the Bible being one of our core values at WholeLife Church. But
awesome,
so important to know the Bible. But if you don't know Jesus,
where does that leave you?
Yeah.
All right. The last question was from Jahimi. He asked, "Is God's grace the interim kingship of Christ to earth? And if so, why?"
So say that one more time for me.
Is God's grace the interim kingship of Christ to earth?
Boy, I'd have to think about that one for a little bit. I'm a visual learner. Can I look at that question?
Would you like to? And if not, we can always answer it next week, too. If it's something you want to actually think about, it's okay, too. And then we can say that Jahami was the first to stump Pastor Ken for just a moment. And that's okay. There's nothing, I'm
going to go with, Jahami, I would love for you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that, because I'm not sure I'm tracking with you, which that's me, not you.
And so, Jahami, if you're listening, 407-965-1607, just leave us a voicemail and ask your question in a little bit greater detail to make sure we're tracking with what you're asking, and we'll answer it next week, no problems. Because we can do that, because we're in charge and we do what we want.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
All right. We had some takeaways this week. If you go over to our sister podcast, swipe up in today's show notes. Speaking of grace, they're all there. Do it. And they're always good to think about with yourself, your family, someone else maybe you're thinking about. Holy Spirit's kind of impressing you, like maybe this is someone you should talk to. These are
some really easy things that you can talk about, and they open up a whole bunch of dialogue. Our final thoughts are it was near the closing to Ken's message. He said, grace inspires grace. Grace changes lives, not truth. Truth is a guide, but it doesn't change people because you can know the truth and still do the wrong thing. But when you experience true grace, that changes lives. And Randy is a living example. So trust me, I know what I'm talking about on this. And I love this idea because truth has always been our superhero as Adventists. If you have the truth will set you free. We have the truth, and we have the numbers. We have the truth. We have all these different things. And I'm not putting any of that down because there's a lot of people that are smarter than me that know a lot more about those types of things. But man, if you start to think about it, the truth alone doesn't come anywhere close to our expectations of what a superhero really should be. And if grace inspires grace, then an unstoppable movement is available to us, and it's ready when we just simply agree to pass that on. Grace on grace. That was so cool. It just really resonated with me in a real way, and it made me think, who needs my grace? Everyone that I run into, I need grace. When you put it all together, we're all in the same boat. It kind of makes a team out of everything and a lot more fun, I think.
I would agree.
All right. This week, we already mentioned it, we're talking about the Bible. Well, now, see, I'm not going to be surprised this week because the Bible is full of things that I'm not surprised about anymore. So, I don't think you can, I don't think the hammer's coming this week.
No?
Nah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, probably. But I'm not a betting man because as soon as Ken told me he wasn't a betting man, that he'd give you a firm handshake and maybe buy you some ice cream or something like that, I was like, that's probably the better way to go.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a rich man and I'm not a confident man all the time.
No.
Especially not in the Bible because, there's a lot of people smarter than me. So I'm just going to go, nah.
Yeah.
Pralines and cream.
Best ice cream on earth.
Right. So I'm saying no hammer. If you bring the hammer, I owe you ice cream. Pralines and cream. We'll go to Brewster's. You're
wanting me to drop the hammer, huh?
Yeah. Because I want ice cream, Ken.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
We'll bring the families.
That sounds fun.
All right. See?
We could actually, what would be fun?
What?
We should have a podcast ice cream social. Yeah, we just say, everybody show up at a certain place at a certain time who's listening to the podcast.
Yes.
And we'll all eat ice cream together. That would be kind of fun.
All hail Ken Wetmore.
This is a good
idea. For
idea.
grand ideas of ice cream, podcast, two of my favorite things. This is crazy.
This could be good. And we could take video of it, and
we could do some social stuff, and we'd be like, would you have liked an invite to the ice cream social?
And we won't say anything about it at church, so that we'll know who's listening to the podcast.
Who shows
we will
up.
know.
And then next time, listen, and you'll know where to show up for ice cream. Is that wrong?
Would it be bad if we said we would pay for the ice cream out of your show's budget?
My show has a budget? This is awesome, people. This is awesome.
I think I better talk to the powers that be, the people that
Mr. Monday,
the purse strings people. They're like, wait a minute, you can't make those kind of promises.
You can't do that on air. We're going to talk about this. I like the idea of this.
I do feel like we should try,
some fun things.
Or what we could say is, your ice cream may or may not be paid for. We don't know. You show up to find out. Worst case scenario, you have to pay for your own ice cream and
hang out with cool people and fun people.
Awesome people.
Yeah, I like it.
Ray might even be there. You don't know.
Well, I feel like am I allowed to say the spirit of Ray will be with us? That sounds a little more mystical than I care to go. So, but let's just say Ray's always here.
I feel like it.
I do too. Yeah. All right. That's going to do it for this week, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We always enjoy your feedback. So 407-965-1607, podcast at WholeLife.Church. What did we say? What didn't we say? What should we have said? What are you missing? Let us know, and we would love to feature your comments on the next episode. Jahami, we will be looking forward to catching your voicemail. One way or another, we'll get in touch with you, and we will answer that question one way or another. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a fantastic week.